takes, rook e4. And, okay, so we grabbed a pawn. But it might at first seem as if rook to c7 should give white enough compensation. Certainly white's already in some trouble here, but rook c7 is kind of fun. So the refutation of this, see if you can find it, is rook a to e8. Very simple threat of rook to e1 check followed by bishop e1, rook e1 mate. And it's actually rather difficult for white to cope with this threat. Knight f2 certainly doesn't help because while it puts the rook on a1 into the game, it shuts the bishop g3 out. So still rook to e1 is mate in 2. So all he can try here, well, he could play maybe rook to c8, which is losing a rook. The only plausible move here is king f1. But now we just play knight to c5. And the threat is to play knight to d3, and again, mate on e1. And this is going to be the reaction even to h3. So knight to d3, takes, here, and mate. So black is doing quite well after knight g to e5 as well. This would have been a very playable approach for me, again with the idea of playing c4 and knight to d3. But I played c4 first. Here he played a5. And here, though, I did not play knight g to e5 because of rook to a4. And I was worried about the pressure against this pawn. So just to give a sample line, rook a to c8, knight to d1, b5, takes, knight takes, and now bishop takes e5 is actually quite good. Bishop e5, oh sorry, rook e5. And now the point of this is that if rook a6, I have knight takes d5, taking advantage of the pin, and also threatening knight to b4. So rook a5 is best, protecting the d5 pawn a second time. And after rook to e7, it's roughly equal, but maybe white's a tiny bit better. I have these two weaknesses over on the queen side. Maybe even the d6 pawn in some positions down the road could become a weakness. I definitely have counterplay, but I think white is slightly for choice here. So after a5 in the game, I played b5. He took and I took, but here too I would say he's slightly better. So I think the last line is probably a little bit better for me. But I think I played well here. So knight to a4, and now what should black to move do in this position? I'd love to play knight takes d5, but the problem is that after queen takes c4, I'm actually in some trouble. And the point is that after queen c4, knight c4, my d6 pawn is extremely weak. In fact, it's just a goner. So I'm worse. I'm going to be a pawn down for a little bit of compensation, but not enough. But I was ready for this, and I played a good move. I played c3. So the point of this funny move is that now, after b takes c3 or knight takes c3, which is what happened, b c3, I have knight takes d5, and now there's no queen c4. His knight doesn't get to c4 anymore. So this is actually quite a lot better. So that position's fine for black. So he played knight c3, which is the better choice. Now knight takes d5, exploiting two pins. So the pin against the queen on c2 and the rook on e2. But he found a very cute rejoinder. He played e takes d5, which might not be the very best move, but it's pretty close to even in any case. But here I had a nice, maybe a nice chance, small chance. Rook e2 is what happened, queen d1. And now here, another tactical moment. Figure out what black to move should do. So it's a fun game. There's a lot of these really rich positions where all of a sudden there are a lot of little tactics to look at. Okay, so the basic point, of course, is if I move my rook, he takes the knight on g4. Obviously, I can take the knight on d2, which is what, in fact, I played. But what else can I try? One move that's interesting is bishop takes c3. Okay, on this, queen takes e2, and now bishop takes b2. And, all right, from here, white has a couple of reasonable possibilities. So there's rook to b1, which is the most obvious move, and we should start with that. I have two pieces under attack, so I'd better do something. Queen c2 is forced. Now queen g4, queen d2. And here, if he plays bishop takes d6, well, in this case, I just take the pawn back. If he takes, I take. And I'm up a pawn for nothing, and this probably should be a winning endgame. You can actually find a great example of this kind of ending. I think the last game of the Alyekin Capablanca match in 1927, is a classic demonstration of how to win this this very sort of ending. And I think actually they had this kind of ending at least twice in that match, with Ilyekin winning both times. So you can definitely check that out, and I think you'll definitely benefit from it. But instead of bishop takes d6, white can play better. He could play rook to d1, and here he's only a little bit worse. So this position is not quite as bad. He's in a little bit better shape. But still, he should avoid that. And instead of rook to b1, play the slightly paradoxical rook to d1, not threatening anything at all. The point is that, okay, well, my knight's still threatened, but I mean, not threatening anything new with rook to d1. But after knight to e5, which is, I think, best, I mean, if my knight goes to f6, he plays knight c4, hitting the bishop and hitting the pawn on d6, if nothing else. Maybe knight to e4 could be interesting, too. Anyway, no, knight c4. Anyway, knight to e5, now knight e4, hitting the bishop. And here, if I play bishop to a3, then I'm in trouble in this position. So my queen's obviously under attack, but there's also the follow-up of queen f3, which would hit the bishop and indirectly eyes the rook, as knight to f6 check ideas. And indeed, knight f6 could be a problem here too. Knight f6 followed by queen takes e5. So there are an awful lot of problems here for black in this position. This should definitely be avoided. So after knight to e4, the best move is rook to b8. But now he can just take on a6, and a possible variation here that leads to a draw is queen to c2, rook e1, protecting the knight, saving the rook, bishop to c3, and now queen takes d6. Here, white has, well, certainly quite a bit, but black can save himself. One very funny way he can do it is with queen to b1. This seems to be good enough for a draw as well. But let's just look at the simple rook to b1. So then check, and we have this perpetual. So probably after queen to b1, maybe queen to d8 check is the solution there as well. So either perpetual or rook takes queen, rook takes b1. Okay, so this is kind of an amusing variation. So bishop takes c3. Well, white has to find some neat moves. Well, black has to find some moves too at the end. It looks like objectively this is just equality. But maybe with rook takes f2 I could have had an advantage. So I hope you saw this move. I don't think I did during the game. So bishop takes f2, knight f2, king f2, queen b6 check, and queen takes b2. And here, all right, white's up a piece for 2 pawns, but you can see that all of the white pieces are really under heavy pressure, especially on this diagonal. I mean, you can see that this is causing white all kinds of grief here. So he better find something really good, or he's just going to be down, a decisive quantity of material. So knight to e4 seems to be best, and now f5. Okay, and now what? Well, rook to b1, queen a3 is forced, and now rook to b3. Whoops. And all of a sudden, it might seem as if it's black who's in trouble, but not quite. Queen a5, we're still hitting the knight on c3 twice. Knight to d6. And now, okay, if bishop takes c3, maybe knight to c4 could be a little bit problematic. But queen c7 is best. All right, now knight to b7, bishop c3, d6, queen c4, king g1. And after this exchange and king f1, white is slightly worse, but this is probably going to be a draw. I mean, the pawn on d6 is obviously very good. Of course, black's a pawn might become quite good as well. Black should first worry about consolidating here, make moves like bishop to f6, maybe king f7, and so on, making sure that the d pawn is neutralized. But the thing is, okay, white could maybe just play d7, rook a3, d8 queen, and after bishop takes d8, knight takes d8, rook takes d8, rook takes a6. It's a fairly easy draw. I mean, it's possible for black to win if white plays poorly, but it's a theoretical draw, and that's what's most likely to occur from here. So I would have had some chances here. I mean, white would have had to find a number of difficult moves, but ultimately this should be a draw as well. So anyway, after queen to d1, I played rook takes d2, queen takes d2, knight e5,